Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Challenger Network News. I'm Brandon Bichler, partner at Elixirr. Today, I'm joined by two incredible guests, Natalie Milner and Laura Kotzieper, both consultants at Elixirr. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks, Brandon.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Good. So today we want to kick off a special episode and a special three-part session on women in consulting. Frankly, we have a problem. There are simply too few women leaders in consulting. Week on week, we as consultants take on our clients' toughest challenges, but we haven't been able to crack one of the biggest challenges that we face in our own profession. So we decided, rather than let that continue to be the case, we're going to try to take that on. So that's our goal for these sessions. And we know this is only a start, but what we're going to do this week to kick things off is we're going to have three sessions. This is the first of the sessions. So today we're going to focus on women in consulting at the start of their careers. The next session is going to be women who are midway through their consulting careers, which will certainly be an interesting one. And then we have on Friday, women leaders at the partner level, so at the leadership level. We recognize that this is only a start to what we hope is a coordinated effort across the consulting profession. But we want to take this challenge head on and try to make a real difference. So we encourage everyone out there interested in the consulting profession, people who are working currently in the consulting profession, or people who have worked in the consulting profession, to please take part, engage in the debate, and collectively, hopefully, we can really make a difference here. So I do want to start off by posing a bit of an open question to our guests. Natalie, maybe we can start with you, and then we can go to you, Laura. It'd be good to just hear in your own words kind of what your experience has been like. When did your consulting career start? What has it been like to be a female starting her career in consulting?
Yeah, a big question to start us off with. So I've been with Elixirr now for about 2.5 years. And I suppose there's a couple of different angles that we could kind of approach this question from. The first, kind of an internal one. Obviously, we work with teams within sort of our consulting firm, but also with clients, and have lots of different experiences kind of on different client sites and in different industries. So I suppose from an internal perspective, I've been really lucky, working with some great teams, and definitely working with kind of men, women, all sorts of people from different backgrounds, kind of at the lower levels. However, if we kind of think about this from a sort of client perspective, or working on client site, there have definitely been sort of situations where you look up and all of a sudden you realize that you're the only female in the room, and often kind of the most junior person there as well. So that can be quite a tricky situation, I think, to navigate when you're sort of in the early stages of your career and trying to figure out kind of your place in the whole team structure. I don't know, Laura, if you felt a similar position. I'm sure it's one that sort of lots of women out there in their early stages of their career can relate to.
Yeah, I would agree. I joined consulting kind of just almost kind of 5.5 years ago. And I guess the thing that stands out for me when we're talking about kind of women in the workplace is that I'd never kind of throughout school, university, I never thought that there was a difference between men and females' capabilities. It was only really when I entered the workplace that there were those kind of unintended small things that suddenly made me feel like, senses of doubt, or kind of question my right to be there. Things like when I was kind of a new consultant, there was one meeting in particular that stands out in my mind where it was a workshop and someone thought I was just bringing in the tea, and it was like, no, I'm here for the workshop. So I think on the whole, my experience has been really good. I've worked with amazing women kind of on client side and in consulting teams as well. But there are just sometimes those little things that make you like, that make you question it as a woman.
That's so striking that you've gone through your entire academic career and always felt that you felt really no difference. It was just men and women working together towards their goals and objectives, and then suddenly you did feel that difference in your professional life, which is really strange when you think about it that way. Natalie, have you had similar experience?
Yeah, I think Laura raises a fair point in that, we obviously are at sort of the beginning of our careers and in sort of that more, first couple of years sort of in the working world. And there is definitely a difference in kind of the the interactions that accompany that. And I know that, consulting as an industry in general, I think exacerbates that problem. It's all about relationships. It's all about how you engage, communicate with people. And whereas you might think about sort of university, school, kind of anything that came before that, very insular, you're behind a laptop, you're cracking out essays, and to some extent it doesn't matter kind of your background or your gender. And then you're thrown into a world where actually, in order to succeed, you have to get on well with people. And I think it's there when the differences between how men and women approach getting on well with people and building those relationships, that's when those issues are really sort of exacerbated and brought to the fore.
Yeah, the pure example of that for me was football chat at the start of a client meeting, which I totally get. You're having that small talk, trying to get to know each other. And I've been in that situation often where there's kind of senior male members of the team who bond by talking about their football team and kind of comparing notes. And it kind of starts you off, if you're unable to join in that conversation, as feeling like it's harder to kind of get a way in. Which I think then ties into one of those points that can impact, if there's just a few of those situations where as a woman you feel it's harder to join in or it's harder to kind of have a voice, that it starts to impact your confidence. And that's a point that I think is something that we really need to look out for women in the workplace, to keep kind of helping grow and develop them.
So Laura, and both you and Natalie mentioned that, you've been in environments where you're one of the only females or the only female in the room. And then I can then imagine the scenario where, people are trying to find ways to connect with one another. They're trying to find common ground. And so if there are two men sitting there and they both happen to like, I don't know, a particular sport, that they're gonna jump into that. Is one of the problems potentially that just not enough women on the other side, or women, side by side with you? Is that one of the? It's one of the obvious ones. Unfortunately, it's more the symptom than a root cause, but it's one of the almost kind of things that create the vicious cycle. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think having that representation of actually you're not just the only woman in the room, there's a more senior woman there who's also maintaining those great client relationships, who's also having a conversation, albeit maybe not about football, but about something else that they have in common with that particular client. I think having those examples, and again, I think we've both been in positions where we've been lucky enough to observe those examples as well. It adds a totally different dynamic to the room, to the environment, to the team structure. But for a more junior woman kind of observing that interaction, there's almost a level of comfort there and a level of inclusion, and you feel as though you can also be part of that conversation. And even if potentially due to your level it's not a conversation that you should be getting involved with, you can start to imagine how later down the line that's something that you yourself could do as well.
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier that confidence question, and what breeds confidence. Being in quite an unfamiliar environment, talking about an unfamiliar topic, feeling like, ugh, where do you find that platform of confidence to kind of leap off from? But if there are other, females on the other side or side by side with you, it's maybe did you think that creates a little bit more of that safety zone in a way to then build that confidence?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing that's particularly important when you're kind of starting out in your career, is you're finding your way of being yourself. And the best way is obviously to kind of have role models that you can kind of associate with and you can look up to. And if there's more, I think the statistic is that there's more men called David in C-suite positions than there are women. That just limits the number of role models you have. So you kind of...
Women in total.
Yeah, women in total.
Right.
I think it's David or John, but yeah, so that immediately, but it immediately impacts your ability to kind of see your future, I guess, because there's fewer people whose paths you might associate with or ways of working that you kind of aspire to in quite the same way.
And I think also, consulting in general, it's an industry where all of us who, have chosen to be in it are familiar and comfortable to a certain extent with a level of uncertainty and kind of that feeling of being slightly out of your comfort zone. And all of us, I think, kind of thrive off that to some extent. I think where we need to maybe kind of face the problem head on is making sure that we're not adding to that level of uncertainty, making sure that everyone's starting off on the same playing field to be able to tackle what's already a challenging situation in a similar way, to make sure that, you know, people, because of their gender or background, aren't facing additional sort of levels of difficulty to kind of get up to the same status as everybody else, whether that be confidence, whether that be, you know, ability or feeling like you're in the room, imposter syndrome, all of these things. I think there needs to be a bit more of awareness that actually who you are and your background might have an effect on kind of everybody not being at that same level, even though to an outward perception or from the perspective of someone who doesn't have any of those kind of insecurities or challenges, it may seem as though everybody is on the same level. I think that awareness that actually there is differences there is something that will stand us in kind of good stead moving forwards.
That is interesting. I have to, you know, one of my observations that I've coached women in consulting over the years is that more than men, and this isn't the scientific study backed by data, it's just backed by my anecdotal experience, but I have more conversations about building confidence to try new things, stretch, enter into these situations of ambiguity with women than I do with men. And, you know, it's funny, as you describe the situation, it makes a lot more sense to me of why that might be. Like you said, consulting is already a profession where you're being judged every minute that you are speaking, because, you know, you're dealing with, you know, highly sensitive things, you're dealing with, you know, very serious, you know, challenging aspects of business, and you're being judged. You've been hired to come in and help. And so people are looking for that value every minute of the day. So there is already a lot of, you know, expectation and pressure in the job, and then to be in an environment that's not, you know, really comforting, or, you know, where you don't feel safe in some way. I'm using that as in a broad sense. Does that exacerbate the problem, do you think, Natalie?
Yeah, definitely. And I think to some extent, this is a question of kind of maturity and, you know, tenure at a company, and someone in their first couple of years is naturally going to be more nervous and have lower levels of confidence. But, you know, it'd be interesting to know from you, Brandon, are these sort of conversations about confidence, specifically with sort of the women that maybe you're mentoring, do you find that they continue at different stages of the career, or do you think that they are much more targeted towards kind of being in more of that entry level position?
No, I think it definitely goes, I've seen it at all levels, and you know, at all levels, and you know, the situation's always a little bit different of why that may be, and frankly, a lot of times I don't know why it may be. I just see the back to the symptom rather than the root cause. And I think it's important, you know, that we do understand some of these root causes. In fact, I'd like to go to a question that Ella Reiter has posted, and I do want to encourage anyone who's watching us live at the moment, or even if you miss us live and want to continue the conversation, please do jump in. We really want to hear from people. We want to hear your points of view. We want to hear if you disagree, all of the above. Ella is asking, so what would the one small thing be that we could all do starting tomorrow to make consulting a more welcoming environment for women in early stages of their career? So who wants to take that one on?
I could take that one on.
Okay,
I think there's just kind of really like almost tactical, immediate small things. So kind of, you know, having open days for women, making sure that you have females interview women as part of the recruitment process, kind of showing that you are championing women in the workplace. And then also kind of having men have that awareness kind of some of those unintended consequences that might start to kind of chip away at females' confidence. Things like kind of covering topics of conversation at the start of meetings that everyone can easily join in on, things like that. And I suppose longer term, there's also women do tend to take on more of kind of caring role for families. That's something that is quite culturally embedded in society, and I think will take a long time to change. So what can kind of companies do to help provide a more flexible environment for women and kind of invest in women's long-term future. That's a kind of longer-term initiative that obviously will have huge payoffs, as we know that kind of having more women at C-suite level has huge economic benefits for kind of businesses and like in many ways.
Absolutely. And maybe before we go to you, Natalie, that's one of the things that's just kind of made me scratch my head. In a way, consulting can be the most flexible job on the planet. Like, you know, because it's not that you're in an operational role where you're performing a task. We're actually constantly moving. There's, you know, you're working with different clients. There's a lot of, I know there's a lot of pressure and stress and hours in the job, which is maybe, you know, one of the challenges but it's also flexible. And I think if you know, one we talked about this yesterday in just a conversation among some colleagues, is sometimes it's just like talking to your client, and that actually does take the senior people in the room to sometimes just talk to the client and just set up the engagement model in such a way that it makes it workable for women who might be going through you know, different family scenarios. That's something we're going to definitely talk about on some of the next episodes. But Natalie, before we do, did you have something a response that you'd like to jump in and add to?
Yeah, sure. I think Lara hit the nail on the head, to be honest with you. I think kind of looking at this question in particular, I mean, personally, as somebody in kind of the very earliest of stages of my career, I have found consulting to be kind of a welcoming environment and have been able to work with lots of women kind of at my level. I know that we might be kind of getting into the topic of the next couple of episodes, but I think that it's where we look at kind of women in more senior positions that we start to come across more challenges and more barriers potentially. So I think an awareness that there needs to be a kind of lifetime value when we look at our employees, both male and female, of course, but especially female, looking at it from that perspective and communicating that across when women are joining at the early stage to make it clear that, you know, this isn't a job that we expect you to be in for 5 years. We want you to be here for the duration of your career. We want to have you from analyst all the way through to partner, and setting that expectation right at the offset and showing that, you know, as a company, we can be flexible in order to accommodate this. That for me is, I think, you know, what would make the difference between people joining sort of consulting in with the idea that they're going to stay for 5 years versus joining consulting and wanting to make an entire career out of it.
That's definitely gives some serious food for thought. I think that's really, really insightful. Thank you so much, Lara and Natalie, for jumping in. And so, Ian, I've seen that you've just posted something. What we're going to do is we're going to wrap up the live show, but what we're going to do is continue to engage in the comments. And again, we encourage everyone to do that. So again, this is just the start of a conversation. We recognize that it's 15 minutes, it's short, but we're committed to continuing the conversation. So if you're interested and you want to join in, please do stay on and engage in the debate through the comments. Please do join us for the future episodes this week as we look at middle of the career of consulting and then senior leaders in consulting. And stay tuned as we're planning much more on this topic and really want and actually need all of you to help join in and contribute to the debate. So thanks again, Laura and Natalie, for joining me today. And we'll see you in the comments. Take care. Have a good afternoon.